Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we've been working very closely with Natural England on the management of this site. It's thrown up some real challenges for us, not least because we are responsible for regulation and for enforcement as well. So, in a way, it's been a good learning curve for us to experience the challenges that may face us in the future. So I'll tell you a little bit about our responsibilities, the sort of considerations we go through for determining management measures, the management actions we've put in place for Lyme Bay, a bit about a vessel monitoring system trial which we've used, and the next steps for that, and about developing a more strategic approach to MPA management. So we became an organisation on the 1st of April 2010. We'd formerly been fisheries enforcement, sea fisheries enforcement, common fisheries policy organisation, and also marine licensing activities, things like construction and disposal at sea, and also now extraction. We've since become the Marine Management Organisation, and we've now got Marine Nature Conservation, Marine Protected Area Management as well. We get those responsibilities from legal responsibilities from regulations to implement the Habitats Directive and the Wild Birds Directive for European marine sites, and for UK English marine sites from the Marine and Coastal Access Act. So we derive our powers from that, and we've drawn on our experience of regulating and enforcing sea fisheries to help us with this new responsibility. So, as a manager, the way we look at this is we get conservation advice. We rely on Roger very much to tell us why the site is important through the conservation objectives. What are we trying to protect and why are we trying to protect it? We look at what it tends to be called in England vulnerability assessments. This is where the conservation advisors say this habitat feature is vulnerable to this sort of human activity. And then we've got a range of options as a result of that, depending upon the level that advice is at. If they're saying restore the features, that's a signal to us that there is something wrong with the features caused by man, and there is a bit of action that's required, some positive management action. We've got a range of options. We can do nothing. We can introduce voluntary, non-statutory measures, or we can do statutory measures, or we can do a combination of the two. And in Lyme Bay, we've done a combination of the two. And we've also made a decision as an organisation that for each MPA we're managing, we're going to put information online. So you'll be able to go on there if you're interested and see the Lyme Bay story in all its bloody, gory history. The management tools we have, as I said, are non-statutory, so things like voluntary agreements or codes of practice, codes of conduct. But then we've got a whole list of statutory tools at our disposal. We can make bylaws out to 12 nautical miles, which is the extent of our territorial sea. We can make marine licence conditions. So in the Erdeby example, we would issue the marine licences for the dredging of the estuary to keep the channel clear. We can do fishing licence conditions. In England, we have a discrete lot of 10 organisations called Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authorities, IFCAs for short, and they have responsibility out to 6 miles. So we work very closely with the IFCAs as well, and in the long term, we will give Lyme Bay to the IFCAs to manage on our behalf. And there are also national regulations. So looking specifically at Lyme Bay, in September 2010, Natural England wrote to us, and they said that new areas of the site outside that 60 square miles were vulnerable to damage from bottom-towed fishing gears. And it's the pink areas you can see there, the pink dots on the chart here. So we decided to hold some meetings with local fishermen, particularly the local fishermen using bottom-towed gears, who are really quite against what's happened. We liaised with the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority and the Devon Authority, and with Natural England. And in the end, we decided that management action did need to be taken. And we decided to take advantage of an offer that was made to us, or something that was suggested to us by Natural England, because local fishermen in the area, some of them in the southwest of England, had decided they could see the way the land was lying, or the sea was lying, and they decided that they needed to explore the use of vessel monitoring systems to help enable them to get controlled access to areas that they might otherwise be totally excluded from. So we accepted the offer and the challenge, and we introduced a fishing license condition in the areas that weren't covered by the 60 square mile closure. That's the areas in the red background, the 60 square mile closure being the purple line at the top. So in those areas where the pink dots are, we basically introduced a license condition saying you cannot go into those areas without a real-time VMS on board. And that was the statutory part of the management solution. The voluntary part was that we said to the fishermen, while you are in those areas with your vessel monitoring system on board, you must stay outside the reef areas, the sensitive habitat areas. The features of this VMS system are quite interesting. It's very high frequency, so we're getting position reports at a rate of 1 per minute. It's virtually real time. It's got to be at that level of accuracy because we're talking about quite small spatial areas that we're trying to maneuver these vessels in. And it's most important, therefore, to have almost a real-time picture of what they're doing. It uses mobile phone technology. When the fishermen did this, they wanted something that didn't cost very much. And you can't do this with a satellite phone. It's quite impossible. So it uses cheap mobile phone technology. The equipment is literally a little black box of tricks, and I don't understand the first thing about technology, really, except that I like to use it sometimes. It's robust, it's hard-wearing, it's suitable for small boats. It's tamper-proof in theory, so that you can stop people turning it off. Although if you stick a bucket over the aerial, it will turn off. But they have alerts and alarms within the system that would let us know that that had happened. It uses a concept which we now call geofencing, and this is where you put boundaries around the sensitive features. So you geofence the reefs. And it also uses a system of email or text message alerts which tell the marine enforcement officers if a geofence boundary has been crossed. And we also wanted to explore the use of remote sensing technology, because VMS is very good at telling you where a boat is, but as evidence to take enforcement action, you need a little bit more. You need first-hand corroboration that the boat's fishing. So we wanted to look at sensory technology to tell us whether the gear was in the boat or had been deployed for fishing. So the text you obviously can't read on the left there, that is the statutory condition. That was where we said you will have VMS on board if you want to go into those areas where the coordinates are specified. Looking at the map, we gave the fishermen this chart, and we gave them a chart of the other part of the CSAC. You'll see what a complex shape this thing is. And from the point of view of trialing this system for the first time, that was actually quite useful, because we kind of feel if we can make it work here, we can make it work just about anywhere. The red area was totally prohibited. They couldn't go in there at all. The grey shaded areas were the bits that they could go into. And while they were in there, they had to keep out of the green bits. That's basically what it was all about. It was complex to do. We had masses of coordinates to plot, and needless to say, people were giving them to us in degrees, minutes and seconds, degrees, minutes and decimal, and we ended up going for degrees, minutes and decimal seconds. But lessons learned, we should just go for decimal degrees. It's easier for everybody. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. This is a very high-level picture. Don't forget, this was a very simple thing that the fishermen were trying to do. So when we came on board and said, we've got a real management problem here and we want to use your trial system, it was not necessarily what marine enforcement officers would want. But this is what we could see in the office, sat at our desks, accessing it via the internet. So you've got a boat coming in there from the west, turning south into the license condition area, and keeping out of that little green area there. And these are 1-minute position reports. So graphically, it was quite low resolution. Getting a bit closer, though, you can see here we were trying to test the system. So we had an IFCA officer on board the vessel. We had one of my officers sat in Newcastle looking at this on the computer while they were doing this. He comes up from the south, and we ask him to turn in and go as close as he can get to the boundaries of the sensitive area. These are 1-minute position reports, remember. So the skipper helpfully told us, I'm going to have to swing out to port, to the left, so that I can turn in without my gear coming across the back of the area. So he did that. He goes in and he then turns to port again, and he goes up to the north, and we asked him to shave the line of the sensitive area, and when he did that, we could actually see the email alert. Okay, fine. So he shaved the area, and the officer in Newcastle got an email saying the boat had entered the area, and moments later the officer got another message saying the boat has left the area. So we were pretty impressed with that. This is what the fishing skipper could see on his boat because he put the coordinates into his navigational plotter. So that's what he's seeing and when he's working and going in to try and avoid the area. We played around with the system and gradually got familiar with it, and if you look there you can see where the text is pointing. 2 dots very close together. He's hauling his gear at that point, and we're playing around outside the sensitive area, as you can see. I should say the obligations of the Habitats Directive meant if this didn't work, we had to stop what we were doing. So we had to make this work. As we got more and more familiar with reading the patterns of dots, you could tell when somebody was hauling, you could tell when they were shooting their gear, you could tell when they were fishing. And so it proved we were getting quite excited by this point. You could also tell the type of fishing they were doing. So this picture is showing you a scallop dredger at work within the area, short tows, lots of activity in a fairly tight place. That's what a boat using lobster pots looks like, or whelk pots, or crab pots. So we're beginning to be able to interpret the information, and that's what a boat just ordinary trawling will look like through the course of a day. So we were building up some really very interesting knowledge of this system. So we've got to the end of the trial, and we've made some recommendations. We haven't met an interested party who doesn't think this is a useful thing to have, whether they be on the conservation side or the fishing side or the regulatory side. So we've decided to keep the measures in place. But we think a few crucial things need to happen. We need to use as much technology as we can to reduce human error, transferring all these coordinates from one person to another. So from Roger, with his mapping, to us, to the fisherman, use shape files and load them onto the systems. We need to develop software that will interpret the data. We get a huge amount of data, as you can imagine, and it's more than a human being could do if you rolled this out at a sort of national level. So some software needs to read and separate out the things that officers need to look at from the other stuff. We think we might definitely need to explore remote sensing technology. We didn't get very far with it during the trial, but by the end of the trial, they were just starting to be able to tell us whether the gear was being deployed or not. And we think we want to make the screen images much more user-friendly for officers, inspecting officers, so we're talking about chart backgrounds and more useful information. Some next steps for that, we're putting a report on a website shortly, which you'll be most welcome to look at, and we'll be consulting with government about where we go next, and we'll be taking the IFCAs with us on this because they're very keen to have this system as a management tool. It got us thinking as well about a more strategic approach to MPA management because all of this was done without a plan. So we've decided to create a table, and basically I'll show you that straight away. For all the European marine sites in English waters, we have 75 of them, and because we've created this table, I can tell you we have 24 where reef comprises a feature. And what it does is it tells you the name of the site, what its features are, what designation status it has under EU law, what Rogers people are telling us about the risks to the site, what activities are harming them, and then it tells you on the right-hand side of the table what management action we're taking. At a very high level, the idea is we will put this on the website, and you will be able to see what we're doing and why, and if you're the conservation side and you don't like our interpretation of your advice, challenge us and we'll talk that through. If you're on the other side, you can find out what management action we're taking. So, all in all, we like this model. It needs refining. We're thinking of using it for national sites as well as a high-level picture. And underneath it will be links to more specific detail about each site and to what we want to keep simple, a site action plan. So we've been coming at this very much from regulate and enforce, and that is the approach that we've chosen to adopt so far. Thanks very much. Experience the challenges that may face us in the future. So I'll tell you a little bit about our responsibilities, the sort of considerations we go through for determining management measures, the management actions we've put in place for Lyme Bay, a bit about a vessel monitoring system trial which we've used, and the next step, responsibilities from regulations to implement the Habitats Directive and the Wild Birds Directive for European marine sites, and for UK English marine sites from the Marine and Coastal Access Act. So we derive our powers from that, and we've drawn on our experience of regulating and enforcing sea fisheries. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we've been working very closely with Natural England on the management of this site. It's thrown up some real challenges for us, not least because we are responsible for regulation and for enforcement as well. So, in a way, it's been a good learning curve for us for that. And about developing a more strategic approach to MPA management. So we became an organisation on the 1st of April 2010. We'd formerly been Fisheries Enforcement, Sea Fisheries Enforcement, Common Fisheries Policy organisation, and also marine licensing activities. Things like construction and disposal at sea, and also now extraction. We've since become the Marine Management Organisation, and we've now got Marine Nature Conservation, Marine Protected Area Management as well. We get those responsibilities from legal